All right, this probably does not come as a surprise, but mob rule took over one of our nation's elite institutions. Yale law students attempted to shout down a diverse panel on civil liberties. The event turned so chaotic that police were eventually called in to escort panelists from the building. The event featured a progressive atheist speaking along with Kristen Waggoner of the Alliance Defending Freedom. They both found common ground over a 2021 Supreme Court case involving legal remedies for First Amendment violations, demonstrating that a liberal atheist and a conservative Christian both support free speech. But more than 100 Ivy League law students apparently find free speech too unpalatable to tolerate. With me now is Alliance Defending Freedom's General Counsel, Kristen Waggoner, who joins us to discuss her experience in New Haven last week. Kristen, welcome to Washington Watch.
Hi, Tony. It's nice to be here.
So tell us about the event at Yale. This was a free speech event in which you and a progressive atheist, who obviously has a different worldview but agrees that our First Amendment is important, found that there's not too many at Yale that find the First Amendment acceptable.
Well, you're absolutely right. It was deeply disappointing to have essentially two female litigators, both who have argued at the Supreme Court, representing ADF as well as the American Humanist Association, want to speak to the students about where we found common ground. And the Supreme Court decision we were there to talk about was an 8-1 decision. And nonetheless, the students didn't want to hear about that decision. They would rather hurl insults and physical threats. And it got to the point where it was so volatile that we couldn't even exit the building without security.
Yeah, I watched the video of, we played a little B-roll of that, but I watched the videos. They were shouting, and as the professor, who I guess was the host of this free speech setting, and I don't want to miss the irony here, free speech setting, that the students, they all had signs, so juvenile, had signs, but they were hurling, profanity. They were speaking profanities. They were making threats. They had the certain appendages of their hand extended forward. So it's fascinating to me that they can't even tolerate a conversation between two people who have very different perspectives but agree that the First Amendment is fundamental. What does that tell us about the future of American law?
I think that's what was the most concerning to me leaving that room, was that they were not able to engage in any kind of critical thinking, in any intellectual curiosity. There was such a lack of humility and just basic civility to be able to engage with viewpoints they disagreed with. And again, that wasn't even the topic. There was nothing controversial about the topic we were speaking about. I will also say, Tony, that I was disappointed that's the only video that was captured, because that was probably the tamest part of the event, was when they were addressing their own professor, which was extremely disrespectful in the way that they spoke to her and the hand gestures towards her. But that was nothing compared to the next hour that we were in that room.
Now, Kristen, were you ever able to speak? Were you able to ever engage in the conversation?
Yes, and to some extent. At some point, the protesters, all in unison, there were about, I've been told, about 150 people in the room. About 120 of them were protesters. They all stood up at one point at one time after snapping their fingers and doing these precocious juvenile gestures, came down to the front next to me, and Monica from the Humanist Association walked right by us, slapped some signs down, called us some names, walked out of the room. But then for the next 45 minutes or so, they began to pound on the walls outside of the exits of the room and to scream and chant and those kinds of things. In those moments, we were able to get some words in, but then they came back in a few minutes later again to start their jeering and their hurling of insults.
You know, the response is, as you said, a lack of civility. I mean, what makes our country work is that we have, we're a melting pot. We have different backgrounds, different ideas, but we have a common ethic, if you will, the American ethic, which is out of many the one. And you can't do that if you can't have conversations. And that's what's been very troubling as I've watched. I mean, I've been escorted off of campuses, even my alma mater of LSU, because of this intolerance toward differing viewpoints. But if we can't have a conversation, we can't debate these big issues of our day, we will become a more divided nation.
I'm not sure if it's possible to be even more divided in the sense that those, the Yale Law School is supposed to be training up our future leaders, future not only litigators, but Supreme Court justices, legislators, leaders, corporate executives. And their inability to tolerate any opinion but their own demonstrates to us that we're really starting to head towards this sort of tyranny, I think, where the mob thinks that they will rule and crush any opposing viewpoints. And I think for me, this experience, it didn't frighten me. It just deepened my commitment to show up early and often and to do so without anger, to be kind and to civil and to model that to them, but not to back down from the truth and the importance of what's at stake here.
Well, that's one thing I like about you, Kristen. You've never done that. You've always shown courage under control, and we're grateful for that. But let me ask you, did you ever feel physically in danger during this event?
I'm going to share a story real quick with you, Tony, that I probably wouldn't share in other forums. But every once in a while, I can count on about one hand when I get really nervous before something. And my legs were shaking in those moments, to be honest. But I also want to share this moment with you, which was when a note was passed up to me that was typed, and it was a scripture verse. I get a little emotional even thinking about it because it was just the intensity and the volatility in that room. And there was a student who had known in advance that there was going to be a problem potentially. He thought through it, and he sent me an encouraging word from the scripture and said, "Keep the faith and good luck." And it just emboldened me in the sense that I thought, he's not able to speak his mind in this moment, but I can. And to know that, God goes before us and the truth helps human flourishing. So we're on the right side of this, and we need to engage by loving our neighbor, which means speaking the truth in kindness.
Wow, powerful story. God has his people everywhere. It reminds me of the story of Martin Niemöller, who was being escorted to court, and the Nazi guard that was escorting him simply whispered into his ears, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The name of the Lord is a strong tower." God has his people everywhere. And Kristen, always grateful to have you on the program, but thankful for your compassionate but courageous and your committed stand for truth, and of course the partnership with ADF. Always appreciated. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, Kristen Waggoner with Alliance Defending Freedom.